You stand at the front desk of the Millbrook Public Library holding an expired driver's license and a piece of mail with no permanent address on it. And the young woman behind the counter is looking at you the way people look at a problem they don't know how to solve politely. Your name is Cornelius Wexford Ainsley, and you are 76 years old. You've been living out of a modest, extended stay motel on Route 9 for the past 8 months, ever since the assisted living facility you'd been staying at closed its doors without warning, citing financial troubles you never fully understood, and you haven't yet found anywhere permanent to plant yourself again. You have money. You have more money than almost anyone in this town could imagine. But right now, in this moment, none of that matters, because what you have is a piece of laminated plastic that says your name and an address that no longer exists, and a librarian who needs a fixed address to issue you a card. "I'm sorry, sir," she says, not unkindly, just tired, the particular tiredness of someone following a rule she didn't write and doesn't have the authority to bend. "We need proof of a current residential address. A motel doesn't qualify unless you can show a longer-term lease agreement." You nod slowly. You've spent your whole life understanding rules, understanding why they exist, even when they inconvenience you personally. But something about this particular rejection lands differently, settles into your chest with a weight you didn't expect from something as small as a library card. If a story about being reduced to paperwork despite everything you've built is already sitting uncomfortably in your chest, stay with this one, because where it goes by the end is going to remind you that the things worth building are never really about the buildings at all. And if stories like this, about dignity, quiet perseverance, and people finally being seen for who they are, matter to you, consider subscribing, because this channel exists to keep finding stories exactly like this one, and it's people like you who keep it going. You came to this library specifically because it's been your refuge these past 8 months. The motel room is small and lonely in a way that presses in on you some evenings more than others, especially since Rosalind passed 4 years ago and left you without the one person who used to fill silence with something warmer than television static. The library, though, the library has always felt different. Quiet but not empty, full of people quietly existing alongside each other. You've spent hours here nearly every day since you arrived in this town, reading in the same worn armchair near the periodicals section, watching children stumble through their first chapter books, watching retirees like yourself escape into worlds far from wherever their own lives had wandered. You just wanted a card so you could take books home to your motel room, so the evenings might feel a little less hollow. The librarian, whose name tag reads Ginevra Holt, glances at her computer screen again, as though hoping the system might have changed its answer in the last 30 seconds. "I really am sorry," she says again. "I know this isn't ideal, but without a permanent address, I can't process the application. It's policy." "I understand," you say, and you do truly, though something in your voice must carry more weariness than you intend, because Ginevra's expression softens slightly with something like guilt. "You're welcome to use the books here in the building," she offers gently. "You just can't take them out." You thank her because that's what you do. You thank people, even when the moment stings more than it should. And you walk back toward your usual armchair near the periodicals, and you sit down, and for the first time in longer than you can remember, you feel genuinely, quietly defeated. You think about how strange it is that you spent 40 years building things, actual physical things, buildings that still stand in cities across 3 states. And yet in this particular moment, in this particular town, you are simply an old man without an address, which apparently means you are also a man without the right to borrow a book. You built your first construction company in 1974, starting with nothing but a pickup truck, a set of borrowed tools, and a willingness to work harder than anyone else on any job site you ever stepped onto. Over the following decades, Ainsley Construction and Development grew into one of the most respected building firms in the region, responsible for dozens of schools, hospitals, community centers, and though you rarely mention this because Rosalind always said modesty suited you better than pride, several public libraries, including, though nobody in this building currently knows it, the very one you're sitting in right now. Millbrook Public Library was built in '98. You remember every detail of that project. The argument with the town council over the roofline, the way you insisted on floor-to-ceiling windows in the children's section because you wanted kids to read with sunlight on their faces, The late nights spent personally reviewing blueprints because you refuse to let a library, of all buildings, be built with anything less than complete care. You donated the land it sits on. You covered nearly a third of the construction costs yourself, quietly, without ever putting your name on a plaque, because you believed then, as you believe now, that some gifts matter more when they're given without expectation of recognition. Nobody working here today knows that. The librarians who work here now weren't even born when this building went up. To them, you're simply an elderly man in a slightly worn coat, sitting in the periodical section every day, without a fixed address, unable to prove he deserves a library card. This is where things start to get harder, the way they need to before anything can truly turn around. Over the following weeks, you continue coming to the library every day, content simply to read within its walls even though you can't take anything home. You've grown quietly attached to a particular series of naval history books, working through them one chapter at a time, always returning each volume carefully to its place on the shelf before you leave. But one afternoon, a new library employee, younger, more rigid about procedure, a man named Thackeray Voss, notices you sitting in your usual chair for what he considers an unusually long stretch, nearly 4 hours, and he approaches you with the particular officiousness of someone recently trained and eager to prove his competence. "Sir, I need to ask you to either check something out or free up the seating for other patrons. We've had some concerns about people using the library as a place to simply stay warm, if you understand my meaning." You understand his meaning entirely, and it lands like a slap you didn't see coming. "I'm reading," you say, gesturing to the book open in your lap. "I understand, sir, but without a library card, and given the extended time you're spending here daily, I do need to ask you to consider other arrangements. We have a shelter listing at the front desk if that would be helpful." The suggestion isn't cruel. Not really. Thackeray genuinely believes he's being helpful, following guidance meant to protect vulnerable people, but it lands on you with a particular, specific pain, because it confirms something you've been quietly absorbing for weeks now. That in this building, you built with your own money and your own hands, you have been recategorized. You are no longer the man who gave this town a library. You are simply an old man who might be homeless, taking up space in a periodicals chair. You close the book gently, set it back on the reshelving cart the way you always do, and you leave without argument. The same way you've left every difficult moment in your life. Quietly, without complaint, though something in your chest feels distinctly heavier walking out those doors than it did walking in 8 months ago, full of quiet hope that this town might feel like home again. You don't come back to the library for 4 days after that. You sit instead in your small motel room, the television murmuring low, the naval history book you'd been reading incomplete now. It's ending unknown to you, and you feel something you haven't felt in years. The particular loneliness of being unseen entirely, of having built something lasting and beautiful and still somehow becoming invisible within it. This is the breaking point, and it needs to be felt fully, because what comes after it means so much more once you understand how low this moment truly was. On the 5th day, though, something shifts, though not because of anything you do yourself. A woman named Perpetua Falkenrath, who has worked as the town's assistant clerk in municipal records for 11 years, happens to be organizing an archive of old development, permits for a town history project the local historical society is putting together for Millbrook's upcoming 150th anniversary. Digging through boxes of decades-old paperwork, she comes across the original 1997 building permit and donor agreement for the Millbrook Public Library, a yellow document bearing the signature, Cornelius W. Ainsley, along with a formal letter, handwritten, explaining his wish that the donation remain anonymous, that no plaque bear his name, that the library simply exist as a gift to the town's children and its quiet readers. Perpetua, struck by the elegance of the letter, mentions it in passing to a colleague, who mentions it to her sister, who happens to work at the diner 2 doors down from your motel, the same diner where you've taken your evening meals nearly every night, for the past 8 months quietly, always ordering the same simple plate, always leaving a generous but unremarkable tip. The diner's sister, a waitress named Odalis Thistlewood, puts the pieces together almost by accident one evening while serving you dinner. "Ainsley," she says slowly, setting down your plate. That's an unusual name. There's a document going around town. Hall, some old library. Donation from a Cornelius Ainsley. Any relation? You look up, startled, unprepared for your own history to surface here. In a diner booth after months of feeling entirely erased. That would be me, you say quietly. Odalus's eyes widen. You built the library? I helped a long time ago, you say. The old habit of understatement rising automatically. Within 2 days, word has traveled through Millbrook's small, tightly connected community in the way small-town news always does, quickly, and with more warmth than you expected. Perpetua Falkenrath feeling a mixture of embarrassment and urgency once she learns that the man from the original 1997 documents is currently living in a motel and was recently turned away from getting a library card. Contacts the head librarian directly, insisting she needs to see this corrected immediately. This is the turning point, and what happens over the following week changes everything, though not in the way you initially expect. You're sitting in your usual motel room on a quiet Tuesday evening when there's a knock at your door, unexpected, since you know almost no one in this town well enough to receive visitors. When you open it, you find a small group gathered outside. The head librarian, a composed and clearly mortified woman named Wilhelmina Prosser, Ginevra Holt, the young librarian who turned you away weeks earlier, and Perpetua Falkenrath, holding a manila folder against her chest like something precious. Mr. Ainsley, Wilhelmina says, her voice carrying both formality and genuine emotion, I owe you an apology on behalf of the entire library staff. We had no idea who you were, and that's precisely the problem. We should never have needed to know your history to treat you with basic dignity in the first place. You stand in the doorway, unsure what to say, watching 3 strangers carry an apology to your motel room door with more sincerity than you expected from anyone in this town. Please, Wilhelmina continues, would you come with us? There's something we'd like to show you. You follow them, curiosity overtaking hesitation, and they drive you back to the library, now closed for the evening, but lit warmly from within. When you step inside, you find the head librarian has gathered nearly the entire staff, along with several members of the town council, standing near the entrance. And laid out on the main circulation desk is the original 1997 donor agreement, your handwriting unmistakable across the yellowed page, along with photographs from the building's original groundbreaking ceremony. You, decades younger, in a hard hat, shaking hands with the mayor at the time. Rosalind standing beside you in a floral dress, smiling the way she always smiled when she watched you build. Something meant to outlast you both. We found this in the archives, Perpetua says softly, opening the folder to show you. Your letter, about wanting the donation to stay anonymous. I have to say, Mr. Ainsley, I don't think any of us fully understood what that kind of quiet generosity looks like until we saw how you were treated a few weeks ago, without any of us knowing who you were. Ginevra steps forward, her eyes wet. Sir, I am so sorry. I was just following policy, but that's not an excuse. You deserve better than a form letter about fixed addresses. You deserve to simply be welcomed, regardless of your address, the same way this library has always welcomed everyone else who walks through its doors. A value I now understand, that you're the reason exists here at all. You feel something in your chest loosen, the particular ache of feeling erased slowly giving way to something warmer, something closer to being seen fully again. I didn't come here for recognition, you say quietly. I never wanted a plaque or a fuss. I just wanted a library card. Wilhelmina smiles gently. Then let's start there. She produces a laminated card, already printed, your name embossed clearly across the front. Cornelius W. Ainsley, no address requirement attached, no form to fill out, simply a gift, freely given. The way you once gave this entire building freely to a town that has now finally found its way to giving something back. This is where the resolution begins, slow and full, the way real repair always unfolds. Over the following months, something shifts, not loudly, not with fanfare, exactly the way you'd have preferred it, but meaningfully all the same. The library updates its policy for issuing cards, removing the rigid fixed address requirement entirely, replacing it with a broader system that allows any resident, regardless of housing situation, to receive full library privileges with minimal barriers, an idea Wilhelmina credits directly to what happened with you, though she's also careful, at your request, never to make your name the centerpiece of the story publicly. The town council, upon learning the full history of your quiet, decades-long generosity toward Millbrook, the library, and, as it turns out, Two other public buildings you helped fund, anonymously over the years, offers you a modest but comfortable apartment in a newly renovated senior housing complex downtown. An offer you initially resist out of old habit, until Wilhelmina, visiting you one afternoon with tea, gently points out that allowing people to finally take care of you isn't a failure of independence, but simply what community is supposed to look like. You accept eventually, and the apartment sits just 4 blocks from the library, close enough that you resume your daily visits, though now, instead of sitting quietly in the periodicals chair hoping not to be noticed, you're greeted by name at the front desk, offered coffee some mornings, occasionally asked by Ginevra Holt, who has become, unexpectedly, something like a friend, to help select naval history titles for the library's next acquisitions order. Your decades of quiet reading, finally given a purpose beyond your own solitary evenings. Thackeray Voss, the young employee who once suggested you consult the shelter listing, comes to you directly one afternoon, visibly nervous, and offers a genuine, uncomplicated apology. You accept it warmly, the way you've accepted every apology in your life. Understanding that people are rarely cruel by nature, usually just uninformed, or tired, or following rules they didn't have the power to question until something forced them to look closer. The library eventually asks your permission, gently, respectfully, understanding your long-standing preference for anonymity, to place a small, understated plaque near the children's reading section, not announcing you as a donor exactly, but simply reading. This library was built by someone who believed every person, regardless of address, deserves a place to read. You agree to that version, because it feels true without feeling like the kind of recognition you've spent your whole life quietly avoiding. You are 76 years old, and for 8 months you carried the particular loneliness of building something lasting and still somehow becoming invisible within it, reduced to a form that couldn't accommodate a man without a permanent address. But the story didn't end with that rejection. It ended with a town finally understanding something you always believed, instinctively learned that the value of what we build isn't measured by whether our names are attached to it, but by whether it remains open, warm, and welcoming to absolutely everyone who needs it, especially the ones who arrive without an address to prove they belong. You don't need a fixed address to deserve an open door. Sometimes the ones who build the doors are the ones who need reminding. They're always welcome to walk through them.